This happened a lot where we would get attached to a certain concept or idea or rule, and we would get feedback from people saying this isn't working. And we'd finally have to step out of our ego and say, yeah, we got to fix that.
Welcome to Your Creative Mind. I'm Izolda Trakhtenberg, and this podcast is all about using your innate creativity and mindfulness to build a life you love. Whether it's through writing, music, dance, theater, or any creative pursuit, we'll explore how to tap into your unique potential to transform your work, relationships, and daily life. Through inspiring conversations with world-changing artists, entrepreneurs, and innovators, or actionable insights in my solo episodes, you'll learn how to focus your energy, ignite your creativity, and bring more joy and purpose to everything you do. Hey there, and welcome to the Your Creative Mind podcast. I'm your host, Izolda Trakhtenberg. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you're hearing the pitter-patter of little feet, it's because my cats are playing and chasing inside my studio, so that's always a joyful benefit and a dubious one for when you're trying to record a podcast episode, but it is what it is, and I am incredibly excited about this week's guest. I have known this person for, I think, over 30 years now. He's a dear friend, and he's doing some stuff that I think is super cool, that is so relevant to the way we think, the way we do things, the way we work, the way we play, the way we live. I'm incredibly excited to introduce you to John Cooper. But before I introduce you, let me ask you a question. What if a simple deck of cards could teach you about trust, strategy, and the way people reveal themselves under pressure? And that's what John Cooper knows all about. He's a retired NASA engineer turned game designer, and as I said, a great friend of mine for many years. John has spent years crafting experiences that challenge the way we think and interact. His latest game, and one of my absolute favorites, The Gang, takes the high-stakes world of poker and turns it into a fast-paced cooperative adventure, one that's going to sharpen your instincts and changes how you see teamwork. And in this episode, we're going to explore the psychology behind the game, the surprising ways people give themselves away, and how designing games can teach us about life itself. So if you've ever wanted to read a room better, make smarter choices, or just have more fun with friends, this episode's going to be for you. John, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Hi, thanks, Iz. Can I call you Iz?
Of course you
I've
can
never
call me Iz.
asked that before.
Yes, you can call. You are one of the few people in the world who can call me Iz. No, absolutely. I will also answer to hey you. So just so you know, as long as
Okay,
you don't call me Izod, which is a hated nickname from high school that was
right.
bestowed upon me. Otherwise, anything goes. So first of all, I've known you forever. I've known you since I used to do tech support on your computers when we were both working at NASA. So it's been many, many
Yeah.
years. And you have taken all of that, all of that experience, all of that information, also with a love of games and playing games and designing games. And you have created a game for me that is, I can't stop thinking about it and can't stop wanting to improve at it. So I want to just jump right in, and I want to ask you about The Gang, because The Gang, it sort of flips the script on traditional poker because it's cooperative. And that is going to be hard for a lot of people to take. Like, how do you take Texas Hold'em and make it cooperative? But I want to ask you, what was the spark that led you to reimagine Texas Hold'em, such a competitive game, into one that is so cooperative?
Oh, I guess, first of all, I've been interested in cooperative games for a long time now. I'm interested in that design space. Uh, and I think uh, a lot of game players are getting more interested in cooperative games as well, the more they come along. Um, but the other thing, and this makes me think of 1,000 other things while I'm talking. So
Excellent. Say them all.
yeah. Anyway, with the gang, a long time ago, well, years ago, um, Dave Chalker brought a game to just a game night type thing with friends, and it was called The Mind. So a lot of people play the gang and they think of The Mind right away. Um, they also think of The Crew, which is another cooperative trick taking game by the same company that the gang is being sold at. Oh, by the way, I should give props. The gang is sold by Cosmos, which is a big game company in Germany, and they have affiliates in different other countries. Um, so, right, the Mind is a very simple game. It's almost what I would call a proto game. It's very simple to describe. You just have like 100 cards numbered from 1 to 100, and you deal out a hand of I don't know how many cards. I haven't played in a while to each player, and then uh, without taking turns, you play the cards one at a time into the center of the table. I, uh, and you play them face up, I think, when you play them. And all you're having to do is play the cards in order. And so, because you only have a subset of the 1 to 100, um, it's tricky. Yeah, people are waiting for a while before they decide, should I play my 50 yet? Nobody's played anything, that sort of thing.
Mm.
And it's a it's a really neat it's a neat experience. I liked it a lot, and it immediately made me think of other things because in my mind, I don't want to disparage the designer. I think first of all, it was a huge influence on me. The Mind was really good for inspiration, um, but I think it has this little problem where when you are when you play for a while, you end up, I think, counting seconds almost in your head for the numbers that might be coming out. So if I have number 10, I might wait a while. I might wait 10 seconds, or what I think other people are waiting. And so from what I've heard, there's actually a rule against this. You're not supposed to be thinking that sort of thing. So there's a rule against thinking.
Do not think.
Yeah. But but it was still very interesting. And at the time I thought, well, how do you fix that? How do you fix, you know, uh not counting in your head? I was thinking, well, maybe you can maybe you can use the dictionary, just words on cards or something but even then you're going through the alphabet, right? So it's difficult. And then, even back then I thought, oh, well, maybe the poker uh, poker rankings might work because they're uh, they're so varied, and also there are some very rare ones in there and that sort of thing. It's so I sort of put that to the side like I do with practically everything. I think about these things and then I just leave them in my brain somewhere, never to come out again. Uh, but and then years later, I was uh, riding up to a game design retreat that we go to once a year with Dave Chalker. Um, I'll be mentioning his name a lot because he helped me a lot with this. Uh, and on the way up to Michigan, sort of riding in the car, I said, "Hey, I have this idea for a cooperative poker game." He said, "Oh, okay. What's it like?" And I described something quite different than what we came up with. Uh, and he said, "Oh, great. When we get to the roundhouse, that's where we were going, this retreat. Uh, let's uh, let's make a prototype and we'll try it." I said, "Yeah, okay." And then I forgot about it completely. And when we got there, a little while later, went downstairs and I was watching people play games and play test some things that they had. And I sat down at one table sort of by myself, and Dave came over with a bunch of paper and started ripping it up and writing down stuff on it to make little cards. And he brought over a deck of cards too. And he said, "Okay, John, let's do this. Let's make this thing." And okay, so we had this. I had this idea where you have these cards that describe other people's hands, and you're passing them around to try to figure out what people have and well, what people don't have, and you're trying to get a certain number right at the end of the game, at the end of the hand. And so it was okay, but it wasn't really getting us anywhere. And we started discussing other ideas, and then later on, somebody came up with the idea that, well, why don't you do it like a mind type thing where you have 1 to 100, and then you're just selecting what you think your number is based on where you are in the rank. Like, yeah. I said, well, why have 1 to 100? Just have 1 to 10 or something. I mean,
Mm.
there's only 5 of us playing right now. That's how much we had then, I guess. Let's just do 1 to 5.
Make it
And
easier.
yeah, do our rankings. And then uh, somebody else said, well, what if somebody takes the number that you think you should have? And I said, well, you just take it back on your turn. We were doing turns right then. My game has no turns right now, but and I think it was Corey, my friend Corey, who became co-designer on this game, said, well, what if that person, what if then that person takes the number that you wanted? And I said, well, you just take it back. And he said, but that could just go on forever. And I said, but it won't, because it's a cooperative game. And so we tried it out, and everybody loved it. Our game that night. I mean, we kept playing into the night for hours with more and more people and that sort of thing. And so lots of people there are game designers and have been published, and they were all saying, John, you got to get this to a company, and I think maybe Cosmos, because they do the crew and that sort of thing. I said, yeah, okay. And then, kind of promptly forgot about it again. And meanwhile, behind the scenes, some of my game designer friends were like writing to companies and saying, you got to look at this, get him to send you something. And so then somebody at Cosmos got back to me, and Corey and I wrote up some rules and sent it in, and they wrote back and said, yeah, we'd like to publish this. And it was very surprising, because we didn't really send them a completed uh, rule set necessarily. We just said this is the way it could go, and this is the prototype, and we sent no uh, print and play type things or anything like that, because you play with a deck of cards. We just described things, but the people at Cosmos I think they're very good at seeing when something might work
Mm.
and might fit in with their line. So that's what happened. What question was I answering?
You answered that and a whole bunch more. Yeah, we were talking about the spark that led you to sort of reimagine Texas Hold'em as this cooperative game. But what's interesting? First of all, thank you for that. That was really cool. I love hearing the sort of the ebbs and flows of stuff that's going on in your mind, but also other people recognized it for a really cool idea, which it is. I enjoy playing the game. And Cosmos the people there were smart enough to go, oh, there's something here. And they didn't need the whole pitch. They
Right.
needed, they just went, oh, this is so cool. and it's innovative, and let's try it and let's see what's there. So that part is great. But there's something that you said that I kind of went, you said, yes, it's a cooperative game. So people won't go back and forth with the little chips as far as developing, sort of establishing the ranking. And I went, the games we've played in my little game night that I've just started, we have had that happen. And here's the thing. So that has happened because I think people don't yet understand how to rate their own hand in the sort of in the order of other people's hands. Like in our little game night circle, they don't get it yet, and so they're like, oh, I must have a really good hand, but they forget that they might not, because everybody's sharing the flop and all of that. So there is this, and there is this tendency to want to be competitive because we're used to playing poker competitively. So I guess my question to you with respect to that is, you don't bluff in the gang,
Hmm.
and you don't deceive. You are actually trying to build trust among the other players so that you trust each other. When somebody says, I think my hand is good enough to have the six, that there's not going to be that much vying for it. Or if there is, it's only with good reasons. So I guess the question I ask you now is, how does that part of it, the building of trust among the people playing, change the psychology of play? And what do you think that might teach us about real life collaboration?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I saw early on when playtesting different, I mean, we play tested like 50 variants this game, was that one thing that I liked that came out of it was that um, it's a kind of a way of teaching people uh, nonviolent communication.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and and even so, I see sometimes when people play, they say, "Oh, we were fighting over that chip," and I never think of it that way. When a chip is going back and forth, I think of that as a conversation, a
Mm-hmm.
back and forth conversation. But lots of other people don't. They get kind of aggressive taking the chip, and uh, so I don't know if we hit it right there, but um, I think it does over time. It teaches people a couple things. It teaches people to decide on the language and be consistent with it, because you're pretty much developing a language. It's a simple language with these chips that are numbered one, two, how many players there are. Um, and but everybody can, at first, when you get a team together to play the game, uh, you can what you're supposed to be, what your goal is, but you don't know exactly what it means to take that chip away from somebody three times and what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because lots of people think, oh, I'm talking about, what do I speculate my hand will be at the end? And that's fine as long as everybody at the table is agreeing on that.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times you have some people thinking that's what the language is, and some people thinking, oh, I'm telling people what my hand is right now at this very moment. And so it's figuring out, and then of course after each hand, everybody's talking out loud about what they meant by when they took that chip, that sort of thing. And so that's great too, because you get to, at that point, decide, you know, what do people understand that I'm doing, and how can we all, come together on a common sort of language with the chip taking. And I've seen groups, playing for an hour or so. They start out losing constantly, and then towards the end, they're winning constantly. So, uh, and that's where they start agreeing on the language. I love that
Mm-hmm.
about that game. Um, and again, I forgot what you asked.
No, you're it's okay. You're answering the question. Yeah, it's fascinating to me actually because I don't want to get too into the weeds of gameplay, but one of the things that happened, we had a helper card that said you were supposed to say how many face card. Everybody has to say how many face cards they have, and I was up against sort of in a space of going, I have the six. No, she has this. She's taking the six from me, and neither of us had any face cards. We both had a flush. And here, I know I'm getting into the weeds, but it was so fascinating. What I had to, and the 10 of hearts was out. I had the 9 of hearts, and then I had the other hearts to make the flush. And she took the 6, and I was like, ah, doggone it. I know that I have the better hand. And then I went, wait a minute. Face cards, Jack, Queen, King. She could have the ace. And sure enough, in the end, I gave her
Right.
this. She took the 6 and I let her have it, and she had the ace. And so in that moment, it was sort of it's almost telepathic. Like, what are you understanding in the subtext of the communication? And I thought that that was so fascinating that you as a designer put that in because then people get to sharpen some of those skills, and it blew me away to sort of
Yeah.
go, oh, so that leads me sort of to my next question. You've designed more strategic, more abstract games like Homeworlds and like Zarkana, Terra Infused game. But the gang is
Mhm.
really all about sort of reading each other and communicating and teamwork. So I guess the question I have about that is that this is more socially driven and communication driven. And did it challenge you as a designer, as an imaginator, if you will, in new ways? And if so, what new ways did it challenge you to design a socially driven game?
Oh, absolutely, it did. I mean, we worked on this game for about a year, um, and it's kind of, some people are surprised when I say this, but I was one thing was I was working with Corey Keith, who is a perfectionist,
Mm,
um, and so he wanted to get as close to perfect as possible with this game, which is very important. I agreed with him over time that we had to do the best we could in the time allotment that we were given.
hmm
Um, but wait a second, I lost track of of what was the question again?
Oh, basically, what kind of challenges did you have designing a socially driven game as opposed to some of the more strategic abstract games that you've designed before?
Right. Um, there was a lot more play testing with this game because we
Mm,
had to see how other people approached it. And we had to try to find as many different play testers as we could. And of course, Cosmos was doing their own play testing on their side. But I, Corey and I both wanted to see how people played and how it changed their demeanor when they played. I mean, a
mm,
good example of this is we came up with one um, variant of the game where we had people play it. And at the time, we were playing a lot of stuff online, um, uh, between Zoom and also a thing called playingcards.io, which is something where you can essentially play in real time on online with playing cards. Anyway, we we were playtesting this one variant, and people kept, I mean, good friends, kept getting very angry at each other and yelling
mm,
at each other. And at the end of that playtest session, both Corey and I said, "Well, it's not them. They're having a bad time because
mm,
of the rules that we set up for them. We're making it too frustrating, and they're freaking out at each other."
mm,
And so we decided from that what were our principles on this thing. What did it what did we want it to mean when you took a chip, and what did we want it to mean? How would we have that mechanic go? So This is one reason we decided, oh, you can't push a chip to another player. That's
Mm-hmm.
not allowed. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can't be forcing them to take a chip at the end of any round of the gang. The chip that's sitting in front of you is one that you took for yourself. So that became a very important principle. Um, and so, yeah, just I, I don't think I did as much play testing on any of the other games that I've designed. I'm sure I haven't, but it was very important to do play testing here because there are so many different ways that people think, and you have to pay attention very much to all of your play testers and know that that is just a subset. We knew that what we wanted to do was play test with 10,000 people and take data, but you can't do all of that. So we did the best we could. Um, what else? Um, well, maybe something else will come to me as we go.
No problem. Well, and it's interesting because first of all, I love and we have to remind each other when we play that you can't push your chip toward or push a chip towards someone else. And the word that comes to my mind is agency. As a player in this game, I have agency to decide how good relative to everybody else in the game my hand is. And that's
Yes.
what I stick to. And I really like that. But you said something right at the end. I wanted to play test this with that 10,000 people and I get that. It's kind of like when I'm writing a book and I have beta readers. I want to have as many people as possible read it, but this, you're asking them to read a full length novel, so it's kind of a big deal to ask people to do that. Luckily, I'm blessed with a bunch of people who are interested in reading my stuff, but I do ask them to look out for things. I do ask them like, is it is it boring? What confuses you? Are there characters you despise? Are there characters you love to despise? Was there any point at which you were lost? Things like that. Did you catch on to the mystery quickly? That sort of stuff. Or actually, more to the point, at what point did you catch on and come up with the solution to the mystery? That sort of thing. When you play tested, did you give your play testers any instructions on that sort of thing? Like, this is what I'd like for you to watch out for. How does all of that work when you're play testing a game versus something like writing a book and getting beta readers?
Well, I don't know if we did it correctly, but in general, we would just tell people, okay, we have a new rule set. If you'd like to play, come in at this time and we'll try it out. And they would come in and they'd play, and then we'd ask them at the end, what do you think? What do you feel? That sort of thing. And just try to glom on to what their reactions were about these things. And we got completely different reactions from even one single play test, of course, because you have some players who don't like this sort of thing happening and other players really liking it a lot. And so you have to sort of sift through that kind of thing. I don't know if you get the same reactions when writing. I don't know too much about writing, of course, novels, but um, whether you get this sort of thing going on where some people really like a certain paragraph that you wrote or something, and some people not liking it at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
um, yeah. Go on. Sorry.
Oh, no, no. To speak to what you were saying about writing, what's interesting to me about that sort of thing is that the kind of feedback I'm looking for is not, I like this, I don't like this, or I love
Okay.
this, I hate this. So for
Yeah.
me, I'm more interested in is it working? Like what's working for you, what's not working for you? Because whether or not you like it is very subjective. And so I had one beta reader for my first mystery novel say she hated it. She hated the book. And I was like, okay, so I don't mind people tearing apart my work, for example, but you telling me you hate it without telling me why you hate it, just it's not helpful. And so for me, what I'm looking for in beta readers is something that's going to help me make the story better. So when you were having people play test,
Yeah.
what was working for them is stuff you probably took. What wasn't working is stuff you probably took. And then I guess I want to know, how did that shape how you
Right.
modified the design of the game, and did it? Were there things that you were married to that you were like, no, 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 this is an intrinsic part of the game and I cannot change it, even though people are saying, oh, I this doesn't work for me at all? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, this happened a lot where we would we would get attached to a certain concept or idea or rule, and we would, and we would get feedback from people saying, this isn't working, and we would finally have to we'd finally have to step out of our ego and
Mm-hmm.
say, yeah, we got to fix that. It also happened on the other side. The editors that we were working with at Cosmos, we would have Zoom meetings with them, and they would say, no, we want to go back to turn based here, for instance, and we would say, well, that's not working for us, and this is why. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you uh, for instance, you end up with chips in front of you that shouldn't be there. That you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be there, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And those the two editors that we were working with, they're amazing. They would step away. And they'd come back in the next Zoom meeting like a week later and say, "Yeah, we think you're right. We've thought about this, and so we'll switch to that other idea of yours." And this happened multiple times. So it was really good that I was working with people who were willing to break away. To what is it called? Kill your darlings.
Kill your darlings, absolutely.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
some of it is that I can see that very sort of very easily, that some of it is you have to really remove your ego, but some of it is you're solving problems, right? There are certain rules
yeah.
you might develop that create problems or unintended consequences. And I guess I'm wondering, when you were looking for the right solutions, the I guess I'll say elegant solutions to things, how did how did your background, let's say at NASA, as a longtime game player, how did it shape the way you think about the game's mechanics and the player interaction as you were coming up with the changes and the tweaks that resulted in the final version of the game?
Yeah, there were a couple things. Again, we were trying to get as much data as we could from each play test. We were treating it as a sort of a science, really, the game designing part, where we would look for things like James Ernest, I think, who's another great game designer. A long time ago, he said something about, when the players say, "Why is that rule there?" and you have to explain in some long-winded theme type way or something why the rule is there, and it doesn't make sense to them. And even if they say, "Oh, okay, then we'll play with that rule," you have to make note of that, because the players are very smart, and if a rule doesn't make sense to them and you have to just you know tell them to play it anyway,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably not a good rule.
Got it.
uh, Also, over time, as we were playtesting and coming up with different rules, we also solidified a list of principles that we had. And principles are mostly negative. They're things like, you don't want to have a rule set that where you end up with a chip in front of you that you don't think should be there. You know, um, and anytime we ran into those principles with our current rule set, we would say, well, that's violating principle number 3. So we have
Mm-hmm.
to throw this out. Didn't want to, because it looked like it was doing well, that sort of thing. But we knew that it would give us trouble later on. This when anything violated a principle. So um, it was that. I mean, also, as you're going along, you try to figure out what the essence of the game is, that what you want the game to feel like, to what the basic property of it. A lot of people, they say, "Oh, it's cooperative Texas Hold'em," but uh, in a lot of ways, it's not, because, like you said, there's no bluffing, there's no betting, which are very, very, I don't know, important parts of Texas Hold'em poker. Um, but it does use the ranking system and that sort of thing. Um, anyway, ask me again. Sorry.
That's okay. No. I mean, the thing is for me, like I'm listening to you talk and I'm going, okay, so much of this, sort of the elegance of this game that you've designed, and I know we're only talking about the gang. We could be talking about multiple other games that you've designed, but so much of this is going to look at how humans interact, how human nature
Yeah,
plays a role, how people who are testing the game versus playing the game are going to approach this game, and how their own experience, let's say, do you know Texas Hold'em? Have you ever played trick taking games or any kind of gambling? It's going to change how you approach this. So there's all of this stuff that's going in to the soup before you ever even crack the box open. And so I guess that what I'm wondering about is, as you're talking, and you answered the previous question just fine, but as you're talking about this, we're talking about ultimately imagination. And here's what I mean by that. This didn't have to be Texas Hold'em. This could have been cards that had swirls on them or stars on them or some, it did not have to be, we're going to play this the same way as the rankings in poker are. You could have done
right.
it any number of different ways. And the overall storyline of everybody's working together to pull off a heist of some sort is still going to be applicable. It could have been gold bars and silver bars and diamonds and sapphires and whatever. It doesn't matter. that's
Sure.
that's the mechanics, but the overarching story that you're telling is that you're working together to do this thing. And if one of you wins, all of you win, and if one of you loses, all of you lose. So I find that fascinating. And so what I want to ask you about is, as you're developing games in general, I guess, we I just said, oh, it could have been any number of different engines that drove this, but some of this is ultimately your imagination. And so I guess, like, in the creativity versus structure aspect of this game, where does
Yeah.
imagination fit in? And where does game design balance imagination with logic and structure in your mind?
Hmm. Well, certainly they both drive each other.
Hmm.
Uh, um, a lot of times I think of this triangle of game design. I think that Reiner Knizia, a very famous game designer, um, had in one of his lectures that I listened to. He said, you have these three parts of game design. One is the mechanics, how the rules are going to work. One is the theme, and the other is the components. And so I look at other game designers and I see them usually starting off with one of those. Um, and I often start with components for some reason. Um,
Okay.
so it was it was very easy for me to start thinking about, you know, a poker type um, cooperative game. Um, but yeah, of course, we tried all sorts of different other kinds of um, cooperative, not cooperative systems, but of card type systems
Hmm.
and chip type systems and things like that that weren't related to poker. We came back to poker because it is so it it Texas Hold'em, a Texas Hold'em game, tells such a great story as you're playing, you know, and everyone is quite different. from the other. So we came back to poker after we tried a bunch of other things, but um, but related to that triangle that I was talking about, um, yeah, there's lots of times when I come up with like a theme, and I'm imagining this whole world in my head, like space type theme or something like that, and um, and that drives what the mechanics of the game are going to be later on. But eventually, you have to get you're right. You have to get to the logic part of the game where it's making sense. It's
Mm-hmm.
turning that theme into something that is easy to play on a table. I mean, there are plenty of great sandbox games that are these worlds that are done on computers because the computers can do all of the housekeeping. But when you make a tabletop game, you have to make it easy enough for the players to do the housekeeping and yet still kind of have a theme there. Now, I admit straight up that the gang has kind of a thin veneer of a theme attached to it. the, the the important part is how how much fun people have you know communicating what their cards are without telling people explicitly. So it's and then talking about it afterwards. I've seen lots of great games where people have high fives at the end of the game because they won, and then they start describing what they did, and when, and this is what happened when the river hit, and all this sort of stuff. It's so much fun to watch people talk about that. A lot of times they'll talk about it longer than the hand took to play, and
Mm-hmm.
and so I love that, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
I will love it when we actually win my little game night. No, because we're playing with 7 and 8 players. Like literally, I created little 0 chips,
yeah,
and Rich created 7 chips, and we're
yeah,
playing with 8 people, which is very hard. But what's interesting is,
extremely.
yeah, it really is. But here's what's interesting in the experience of playing the game, and I love what you said about people talking about it afterwards, because to me it is all about that communication and collaboration, but also sort of realizing at the end how close we were. The last game we played, we just had one, we were one off, and we would have won. uh and
Wow.
and yeah, and it was just so interesting to watch. Everybody gets, we were so close and everybody's super excited, and then the 5 and the 6 were switched, and it was nail biting, because we were all like, yes, yes, the 1 works, the 2 works, the 3 work, and then 5 and 6 did not. But what's interesting to me is how much we were rooting for each other. And again,
Yeah,
we come into this space of, because it's cooperative, it's an entirely different way of playing a game than a lot of games like your Monopoly or whatever, that are winner takes all. And so I guess the next question I have for you about that is, when we're talking about the player experience, this is this is something that's so important to me as someone who does workshops with companies. I'm very interested in the participants' experience of what we've done. And you've
yeah,
designed games about war, about journeys, space battles, and then the gang. To me, it's about trust. It's about playing, trusting each other, and playing sort of in that space. And I guess the thing that I'm wondering is, with respect to player experience, A, do you see a common thread in the type of experiences that you're creating for players in the various games you've designed? And B, what experience do you hope players have when they play your games?
yeah. Well, I've been designing for so long that this has changed over time. Um, when I first I designed Ice House, which was a really weird game played with pyramids that's sold by Looney Labs. Um, and it's also uh, non turn based type game. It's free forms. Um, but it I didn't even really realize what kind of game it was. Um, I thought of it as sort of an abstract, uh, not exactly a war game, but you're trying to get territory, kind of. And it's not really that. It turns out after watching experts play over the years, it's a negotiation game,
Mm,
where you're actually working with other players who are your opponents. It's not cooperative, but you're working with other players to, agree on, okay, you take those 2 points, I'll take this one, that sort of thing. And it turns into almost pure negotiation if I've noticed if people are playing really well.
hmm
Um, and so sometimes what people see in a game that I've designed turns out to be different than kind of what I was going for. I guess I always want people to have kind of a different experience. Um, that I want there to be, a lot of times I want there to be a narrative, kind of a story that they can talk about at the end, even if it's a war game like Homeworlds. There's all of these phrases that people come up with now that I don't even know all of them, like the bluebird attack and things like that, that it's really neat watching people talk about these games afterwards or even during the games. And so it's that story. I was thinking it makes me think of other games that I'm not usually into really long games, but there's one called Terraforming Mars that I really like a lot, and I don't think I've ever won it, but I like it because it tells a great story, all the way through, and it takes like 3 hours to play sometimes.
mm.
Uh, and I don't expect to win the whole time I'm playing. I'm just watching this story unfold. It's a whole lot of fun. Um, so I think even those very competitive games, if if they either have a good theme or they have a good narrative to them as they go, it's a lot of fun to play, even if you know that you're going to lose. Probably isn't true for everybody. A lot of people really need to win, you know.
Hmm.
So I guess that's what I like in games is when people afterwards can discuss them, you know, at, and talk about how the game unfolded and what they would do different next time, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you know what's
Mm.
interesting about that, and I understand and I agree with you sort of to an extent, or maybe I agree with you 100%. But here's what I thought of when I was listening to you speak. We were playing Who What Where in
Yeah.
at our last game night, and here's what's interesting. It's a game. If you're listening to this and you're going, "What is Who What Where?" It's a game where you have a who, a famous person, what are they doing, and a where. You choose a location, and then you mish them all up, and everybody has to draw a who, a what they're doing, and a where they are, and it's almost always just a ton of fun. But what's interesting to me is sort of the culture that developed when you and I and Rich and all of our friends used to play at game night at the Loonies, that there's this culture. For example, when you start guessing what you think the person has drawn, you go, clearly, this is Mother Teresa making pancakes on top of the Eiffel Tower or whatever. So that's how you begin. And that's sort of a culture thing that's carried over. And Rich and I had to sort of tell everybody that that's how you begin. You begin your guess with, clearly, this
Yes.
is the Reverend Jesse Jackson playing hockey underground or whatever, right? And
Right.
now everybody's doing it without even thinking about it. So there's a little culture developing around that. And yet there's some cultural things about that particular game slash activity, like there was a little known rule that if you at the end go, well, what you should have drawn, the person is allowed to crinkle up their piece of paper and throw it at you, right? That was one of the little rules. And that happened. And exactly that happened. One of our friends went, well, you should have drawn this. And immediately I said, there's this little known rule that the person is allowed to crinkle up their piece of paper and throw it at you. And it's because of this, yes, it would have been better for you if that person had drawn it that way, but that's not what they thought. So that brings me to this notion of culture around a game, right? You said you want people to talk about it afterwards and that that's really fun for you. Are you
Yeah.
noticing a culture developing, maybe it's already developed, around some of your games, especially the gang, since it's the most recent one? Is there a culture? Do you hear from people who are playing the game or read it in the reviews of the game where you're noticing that sort of thing happening?
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, I mean, just the other day I was driving back from the climbing gym with Gina, and she was just reading some of um, the posts and the comments from some French players. Uh, Apparently, the gang has really gone over well in France,
Awesome.
and yeah, and so a whole lot of the comments they were just describing hands that they had and
Mm.
how much fun it was, and what happened and that sort of thing. So it was really cool listening to that coming from a totally different place, um, and uh, I don't know cultural type stuff that comes out of that.
I mean, it might be too young a game. It just came out
Yeah,
relatively recently. I'm going to have you back on the show in 2 years, and we'll see what kind of things you have to say about that then. But it is interesting to me because I'm already noticing when we're playing the gang that certain things are happening, like, oh, you know what you've got, or I know what you've got. And it's this, and afterwards, when someone shows that they had the Jack of Hearts, I'm like, yes, I knew it. And I'm
yeah,
starting to write down on my phone what cans I think people have because I want to improve my skills at
right.
at communicating. So I'm literally writing things down. I think you have a pair of threes and I think that person has three of a kind or whatever, and it's very interesting to me, and that may be just because my that's how my brain works, but it's very interesting to me to see what my percentage of guess, the percentage correct I am as far as the guesses about as far as what everybody had. But
Yeah, that's great.
yeah, it's
This
a lot of fun.
yeah, that I mean, this was in some of the comments, that Gina was reading from France, where they were saying, yeah, at the end of our round, before the people show the cards, we all try to guess what they were,
Hmm.
and we're
Hmm.
often very right.
Hmm.
So it's that's a neat thing that came out of it that I didn't quite expect. Um, I remember too. I showed just the prototype of this game very early on at Gathering of Friends, which is another. It's a much larger um, sort of convention that includes a lot of game designers, and the people there took it and ran with it. And the next year, when we went back to the gathering, um, people were coming in with their own sets
Oh,
of
wow.
like chips numbered 1 to 12 and
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
And just I remember I went into the big room really late at night. People play werewolf. They get these big groups to play werewolf in this large room at the convention late at night because that's when you play werewolf. I walked in there and there's a big table that I thought they were playing werewolf at, but no, they were playing my game.
Awesome.
So, and it was really wild because there were like 10 people there playing. So of course they're going to lose most of the time. They were just playing hand to hand and not caring about anything else. Of course, they're
Hmm.
not trying to rob banks or anything. But every now and then they'd win one, and there was just this huge, glorious cheer from everyone, sort of thing. So that was cool to watch. Um,
Yeah. I have no doubt because for us it is that kind of, did we get one round right? Did we get it right? And we haven't yet, but I imagine at the next game night we'll do it because it's the same, relatively speaking, the same group of people playing and they're all learning.
Yeah,
But what
my suggestion is if you're playing with more than six people, more than six players, then maybe just play hand to hand and don't care about any of the other cards or well, I don't know. Maybe you can have helper cards, that sort of thing, but
well,
don't care about the gold bars or the alarms. Just play hand to hand. See what
yeah,
happens.
we so you'll be very amused to hear that I was passing out the wrong cards. We kept losing, and then instead of giving out the helper cards, I was
Then
giving
you
out the
make it
cards that
harder.
made it harder. Yes. And
That's
then I
great.
realized it and I'm like, oh, and of course everybody was appropriately ticked off at me that I had made the game that they really wanted to win even harder.
Right.
But
Right.
it was just me not understanding which cards I was supposed to hand out. But what's interesting to me about that is that there is, again, we did a little, who's the second story man, who's the safe cracker, okay, who's going to be the, who's the computer hacker, and we sort of designed little roles for each other before we played the
Yeah.
game. And there's again, there is a culture sort of developing, and I can see it's gonna stand the test of time, which I think is really cool because that's the game everybody wants to play as soon as they show up. Okay, let's get out the gang, and that's the game we play
That's
first.
great.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
lot of fun. And I just recently wrote my Amazon review, and that's exactly what I said, that everybody has to play that game first.
oh, that's excellent. Another good thing that I didn't expect, or I didn't predict, I guess, was that after it started getting sold, a lot of the reviews coming in said, "Oh, this is a really good game to teach your friends who are not gamers." Because it introduces them to gaming, and uh, I guess it does it because it's simple to explain. A lot of people already know a little bit of poker, and they can learn the rest. And it's quick, so and it's more kind of more party game type thing, and also it's cooperative. So you're not you know uh, I don't know. A lot of people who are beginning gamers, they feel kind of um, like they're going in with a handicap kind of thing when they
Mm.
when they start playing a game. But this everybody's helping each other. So um, I, that's one thing that I didn't expect was that from the reviews is that people would say, "Oh, this is a great game for introducing people to gaming," and I really like that a lot. Um,
And you should. that's a that's a high compliment. Uh because it is one of those things when you're inviting people over for a game night, for example, as I've just started doing a few months ago. Some people were like, "Well, I'll try it," and now they're not rabid, because I don't want to say any of my friends are rabid, but they're very excited. They're like, "Okay, when's the next game night?" And it's because, again, we're developing this culture of people who play together, and a lot of it is, can we play in a way that doesn't make anybody feel like crap if they don't win. That's, I don't want to feel
right.
like crap, and that's part of it. Is there's this whole sore loser sore winner thing, and in the gang there is no such thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess again, John, this is super fun talking to you, but I realize you have a life to get back to. But I have a few more questions. So
Sure.
I'm going to ask you something that is sort of away from the gang, because I know we've been almost exclusively talking about this fabulous
Yeah.
game that I love so much. But you're a gamer. You played thousands and thousands of games, and do still play a lot of games. And I guess there's some games that stand the test of time, but most don't. And so I
Right.
guess what I want to ask you is, what do you think makes a game truly timeless? And then, does the gang have that secret ingredient? Because I have to talk about the gang a little bit more.
um, well, I'll answer the second question first because it's the easiest to answer. Yeah, I hope so. We'll see.
Fair enough.
We'll see. um, but it's interesting because certain games, just if you just introduce them today without anybody knowing anything about them to begin with, or without them having a history, certain games I don't think would withstand the test of time. Games that have withstood the test of time would not withstand the test of time if they were introduced today.
Hmm.
Just cold, like cribbage. I that is such a strange game with so many crazy rules that have, I think, been developed mostly by drunks in bars. It's almost like Fizbin. It's just it's a crazy game, but it works. It works, and it's withstood the test of time. There, even though there's all these extra things to it. Two for his boots or whatever, and so that's one thing. If a game has a history to it already, if it's sort of evolved over time, like chess, I think is a good example. Um, Chess started out as something that was, from what I've read at least, it started out as like a four-player game that was closer to Parcheesi. And in fact, the word Parcheesi and chess are very similar to each other.
Mm.
Um, but then over time, it became a two-player game, and where all of the information is available out there, and then it evolved. The pieces, the way they move evolved over time, and where they're placed at the beginning, and that sort of thing. So it took many, many, hundreds of years for that game to get to where it is now. And that's a beautiful game. Um, uh, what's another? I don't know. Anyway, so those are the older games have withstood the test of time in part because I think they're designed almost in an evolutionary type of fashion over many, many years, sometimes hundreds of years. Um, Other games, I think a lot of times it has to do with how much the game makes sense to people when they're playing it, and it comes back to that James Ernest why thing again. If you have rules in there where people are saying, I know this rule is here, but why is it here? I
Mm.
don't think that game's going to last, probably. um, but it's very hard to say, because again, it's a cultural sort of thing. If a game catches on, um, I think a lot of times it's I I don't understand a lot of times why certain games do catch on, but it's a mystery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And lately, easily 1,000 games come out every year, uh, so
Wow.
people are really into it. So you've got a huge uh, world there that these games are trying to survive in, I guess, if they're trying to withstand the test of time. And even at this point, I think a lot of people are designing games to just be a one off, sell them, and then they're on to the next game. Um, and then they just forget about them. A lot of producers, I think, are getting that way. But um, yeah, it's just, I don't know. That's a very good question, and I've been trying to answer that myself over the years. What makes a game withstand the test of time? And that was actually a goal. Uh, Even though we didn't know how to get there, that was one of our goals, was to try to get as close as we could to a game that people would continue to want to play um, with the gang. And and actually, I'm surprised that with my game Homeworlds that I developed many years ago, it's still being played. It has a following. It might not be a very big following, but there's people in you know Czech Republic, or is that what it's called now? Czech Republic.
I believe so.
Anyway, there's people over there in Europe and stuff that are playing Homeworlds online. You know, with people all over the world. And uh, that's really surprising to me because that is a game that is, I guess it is for gamers. It's very hard to introduce this game to anyone. It has strange rules that are difficult to pick up and difficult to remember, and yet it's got its following. So I'm surprised it's lasted this long. I'm happy with that.
That's
Uh,
so interesting to me, actually, because there's two, I think there's a river here of gamers, of people who play games, and there are tributaries of this river. And there are people who are going to get passionate about those very things that you said, strange rules and the culture that's developed by people who play this game. And then there are people who want to play games to perhaps be social or to have a good time, to have a good experience. This is not to say that people who are playing a game like Homeworlds are not having a good experience. I think they probably are. I've never played
right.
Homeworlds, full disclosure. But there's something to me about people who, like Rich, my husband, plays Homeworlds often. And,
Mhm.
he's on his computer playing Homeworlds. And I look at it and go, very cool that you're playing. It's not my thing. And some of it is, do you know the kind of game player you are? If you're playing a game, maybe Homeworlds would be for you, maybe something like The Gang or a really fun social game like Say Anything from North Star. Those are games that are a different kind of game. This is still going to give you a good experience. And so that's sort of my long-winded way of saying that some of it has to be your goal as a game player, but also the experience of playing the game. If the experience sucks, you're probably not going to go back to it. If the experience is challenging, if you're a certain kind of player, you probably will go back to it just so that you can get better at the game. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. I think that's true of a lot of people. And again, there are a lot of different kinds of players, and they're all looking for different things in games. Um, but you remind me that one of my sort of meta design goals over the last 30 years or so has been to design a game that Gina likes because she's very finicky.
Mm.
Um, and when, any game that any game that she discovers and shows me, I generally like. But she doesn't like all games, and so that was one of my goals, and I managed to do that with the gang, which is great. Um, so I can just cross that off the list and not try that anymore.
Right.
Um,
We're done.
yeah. But yeah, you bring up some good stuff there that I have to think about. I guess. No.
Well, you always make me think whenever you and I talk. So this is so great that you came on the show so we could do it here. Um,
Yeah.
I have, as I said, I have a bunch more questions, but I won't keep you too much longer. I want to ask you something about sort of, again, going back to the beginning
Hmm.
of this process of designing the gang. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice when you first started designing this game, what advice would that be?
Hmm. Man, that's a really good question. That's a question I should have asked myself a while back. That's going to take a while to come up with an answer, I think.
I try to excel at questions like that.
I guess one thing that I've learned, and I'm trying to get into lately, is to when I come up with an idea, to not let it just fester in my brain for years and years, to actually bring it out, make a prototype, no matter how stupid it is, the way Dave Chalker taught me to, and just start playing around, with real physical stuff on a table, and instead of just letting it play in my mind. Because games, when I design games in my mind and I play test them in my mind, they work perfectly. I
Mm.
don't want to bring them out to the table because that's where they stop working perfectly. so so it's that getting past that barrier, is very important, and I think I would tell myself that uh, years ago. You know, if I could go back in time, and also give some good stock options and things like that. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, yeah, I think that's important. And also, when you design, this is part of it. Sure, everything works great in my head, and I see glorious worlds of game design in there. You know, that I'll sit there and think about for hours on time, hours and hours, until Gina says, "What are you doing?" But but you have to bring it out into the real world, and that includes showing it to other designer friends. I think that's very important. Game design, I think mostly, and this is also why I brought Corey in to this design. Well, partly because he really wanted he wanted to help with this thing, but but I brought him in because game design, I don't think, really can be done on your own.
Mm.
You can't do game design in a vacuum. You need to bring it out to other people, to other players, and to other game designers. I think, really, I mean, this is not true of writing. When you do writing, you can write a book yourself. You can have other people edit it and that sort of thing, but you don't need to bring in, you know, other writers. I think a lot of times it's at least it works best for me to bring in other game designers to bash each other's heads against things. Um, and Yeah, just not designing in a vacuum is one thing that I learned from that. And game designers are very nice people for the most part.
Always a good thing.
My game designer friends, when we come up with ideas, they're like, okay, this is your idea. Now let's change it. And it's still your idea, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and we're all rooting for each other. There's no real competition or anything like that. This is important work. We all realize that it's important to bring these things to the table and to hopefully have people have a lot of fun. Um, so yeah, that's the main thing. I think I would I would tell myself to get that game out of your head, get it onto the table. And since then, there's been multiple times where I've gone to Dave and I said, I have stuff in my head and I need to help you. I need you to help me get it out. And he'll come over and help me out. So,
Ah, Chalker Dave, we love him. Yeah,
yes,
and it's interesting what you said about writers. I actually will respectfully disagree. I think writing and I run a writers group in part because I think that when people, it's not that they're trying to make each other, no, it is. Some of it is you hold each other accountable. I'm going to write this, I'm going to do this. And then other people are there to support you and also to nudge you when you're afraid or not interested or lazy or whatever it is. But the other part of
right.
it is just the other day, Alan Fessenden, shout out to you if you happen to listen to this episode. I'm writing a story for an anthology I was asked to be a part of. It's a short story, it's a mystery, and I said something about writing it and that it feels a little slow in the beginning. And Alan said, you need to hit the ground running. And he's in the writers group. And he's like, why aren't you hitting the ground running? And I went, Duh, I should be hitting the ground running. And then I went through and changed the beginning of the story so that the second or third paragraph is actually now the beginning. It's a much stronger story. But I needed him to go, you can do this. You can totally hit the
Right.
ground running here. And he didn't even read the story, right? So there are ways that we people who are creating things that have never existed before can help each other. It's not just people beta reading it. It's when it's in its infancy. If you have people who are you support them and they support you in this creative thing that you're doing, that's invaluable to me.
I see.
It's
Yeah.
so there's a lot that I think we can help each other do. Like you coming on the show today and being so fabulously generous with all of your wisdom and all of your knowledge and all of your thoughts. It
Yeah.
enriches my life. It enriches the life of anybody who's going to listen to this. And it's also, for me, an opportunity to highlight something that is of interest to me, this notion of imagination. And like you said, getting it out of your head and onto the table and then seeing what's there. There's something very powerful about that for anybody who's ever interested in making anything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy to make. I mean, yeah, it's so easy to make stuff in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have to be accountable to it or anything. And so that's the nice thing, is that if it stays in my head, you know, um, that's often good enough for me,
Mm.
because I'm not having to bring it out on stage or whatever. You know, I have terrific stage fright, so so a lot of things stay in my head, but I'm trying over, you know, over the years to try to bring this stuff out more and play around with it in the real world. Uh, I think that's very important.
It is, and and those of us who get to be even a little part of what you're bringing out into the world are honored to help with that. And that's a lot of this. I'm just going to break away for a second and say, if you're listening to this and you're going, "Ooh, I have this idea. I have these thoughts about writing a book or designing a game or whatever it is." Seek community. Find other people either online or around you who can be people that you bounce ideas off of or collaborate with, because it's so important. We need to keep creating because creative's going to create, right? This is something that's so
Yeah.
important for all of us. And so, John, I am super grateful that you took the time to be here and to talk about this stuff. To me, it's all incredibly fascinating. I've never designed a game, but there's something very powerful about designing what will be an experience for other people. So I'm really grateful, A, because you design games I like to play, but B, that you're doing it, even through your stage fright. And, I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this. I used to have horrific fears, phobias, even of speaking in public. Not that you can tell now because you can't shut me up, but, uh, but it is, overcoming that because you have something to share is very important. And I'm grateful to you that you're doing the work to do that. So thank you for that.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's very cool. So to end, I have just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
And then I will let you go. So
Fine.
first of all, if somebody wants to find out more about the gang, about Homeworlds, about Zarkana, about the games you've designed, about the work that you're doing now, where do they go to find you?
Right. BGG, otherwise known as Board Game Geek. I'm on there, I think, as Cooper John. I don't know. I will try to link that into the link tree that you told me about.
Yay.
Um, and uh, and also Looney Labs, um, uh, game company that my very old friend Andy Looney and Kristen Looney started a long time ago. They sell Homeworlds, and they sell a whole lot of other games too that are Ice House based. That is with the little plastic pyramids. So I would just seek them out online, and I'll try to link to them too. And I I guess also Board Game Arena is a place where you can actually play Homeworlds and with people from all over the world, I guess. And you can play lots of other games on there too that aren't mine. Um, but a lot of friends have games up there, and I'm hoping someday that the gang will get onto Board Game Arena, but we'll see. Um, and that's all I can think of right now. Uh, I'll put up links on my link tree, like you
Cool.
suggest.
Excellent. And
And my
also,
yes,
uh, you can get the gang on Amazon. I don't know if you
yeah,
can get it on Cosmos, but this show has listeners all over the world. So if you go to, I guess, the Cosmos website in Germany, it's probably available there.
yeah,
It's going to probably be available at various gaming conventions and Toy Fair, probably. I will be there this weekend. If you're listening to this after March 3rd, then you're listening to it after Toy Fair has come and gone. But there are always conferences and things like that where games are available. So if you want to try the gang, you can. And I know this
Yeah.
probably sounds like a long commercial for the gang. It's not, but there is something really cool when you find a game that you just want to play again. That you're like, okay, how many people are we going to have? And especially with these folks coming to my game night, they're going, okay, the gang is first, and then who, what, where, and then taboo. And that seems to be the order of
That's
how we play the games. And
great.
so they get to, people, when people like a game, I think they choose to play it and they will ask to play it. And I think
Yeah.
there's something very powerful about that. So thank you for those links. I will put all of that stuff in the show notes as well, so that if you're listening and you want to know more about any of this stuff, you can find all that information. And now I have to get you to the last couple of questions, John. And the penultimate
Okay, but before you
question,
do that,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I also wanted to point out that local game shops often have the gang in them. Uh, I think Borders Books has had it a few times there and that sort of thing. So just check out local game shops and see if they have that if you're interested. It's very cheap. It's like $15. So, you know, it's candy. Um,
Borders books, or do you mean Barnes and Noble?
sorry, Barnes and Noble. Did I say
Okay,
Borders?
you did. And I'm going, oh, would that Borders books would come back from
Yeah,
the dead.
yeah,
But no, the zombie version of the gang is available at Borders
yeah.
books. Yeah, and absolutely shop your local game stores. Totally. If you're living somewhere where there is no local game store, I totally get it. Go to some of the other places online. But yeah, this does broker a thing. This makes me go, yeah, local game stores, local bookstores, local places that you can go to support is always better. And we're doing this interview on February 28th, which is the don't spend any money day. So people might not buy
Right.
it today, but maybe they'll buy it tomorrow. But yeah, but also shop local. That always is a good thing to remember. Cool. Thank you for that reminder.
All right.
Okay.
Penultimate question.
Penultimate question. What is it that gets you up in the morning? And I don't mean an alarm.
And you don't also mean insomnia?
If that's what gets you up in the morning, that's fair. It could be your dog wanting to go for a walk. For me, it's my cat sitting on me and meowing. That's how I get up every morning.
Um, what gets me up in the morning? I think often these days it's just like that thought of the first cup of coffee that I'm going to get. Um,
That's a good
but you're
reason.
but you're meaning something more esoteric. I
I
don't
am
know.
not. If it's the first cup of coffee, it's that if that's the answer, I totally agree. That's my first thing is my French roasted, not red French pressed first cup of coffee. I've started drinking coffee again. Yes, I have. But
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. If that is what gets you up, I completely understand. I am there with you.
I, I mean, a
You've
lot of times I end up just waking up and then I start thinking about something, and then I know that I'm not going to be able to stop thinking about that thing until, after I get a shower and a cup of coffee and I think about it some more. But so yeah, uh, I think that's usually it. Yeah, just again, designing in my mind, I guess, is what wakes me up.
Sure. And sometimes you're designing. I do this thing where if I've got a thorny problem, I will remind myself of that problem right before I close my eyes to go to sleep and just tell Edna, the librarian who lives in my head, hey, Edna, work on this while I'm sleeping. And more often than not, I will have made progress in my ideas and
Nice.
thoughts about it when I wake up in the
Yeah.
morning. So Edna looks suspiciously like Edna Mode from The Incredibles. So if you know what she looks like, I literally have her, on my desk, and I have a couple of Edna dolls all over my apartment because she is such an inspiration to me.
Oh, neat. I
Anyway,
had never noticed.
oh yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. The phrase "I never look back, darling. It distracts from
Yeah.
the now" is my favorite phrase, probably of any movie ever. I love that phrase so much. So yeah, no. You'll notice her next time you come. She is in a couple of places. I also have Princess Leia dolls and Wonder Woman dolls and Ella Fitzgerald dolls and Jane Goodall dolls. So I
Right.
am, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So yeah, I have a fair number of powerful women dolls. Anyway, different
I
different
mean,
conversation altogether.
uh, uh, um, I guess as an aside or a footnote to that question to the penultimate question. Um, I, I'm retired now, and so I don't have to wake up a lot of times. But I still often do. I wake up early and I start fiddling around with coffee and with things in my brain, and yeah, so it's nice. It's liberating not having to wake up because I have to go to work. Um, and I'm sorry that other people have to do that.
I could not agree more. And I work from home, so my office, there is no definition between, there's no sort of distinction between work time and playtime for me. And that's an interesting thing. I often, if I know I'm going to have to work, I will go out of the house to do that because I work from home. Anyway,
Right.
so yeah, and that gets into a whole other how do you plan your life set of questions that you and I do not have to answer today.
Okay.
But maybe someday we can do like a roundtable of people at various points in their lives and how they do that. But here's the ultimate question. Here's the last question.
All right.
And it is this: if you had an airplane, environmentally friendly, of course, that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
Oh, wow. Do I have to? Oh, okay.
No, you don't have to. This is not compulsory, but if you had something you wanted the whole
I
world
mean,
to know.
just off the top of my head, probably sounds pretentious, but it's so funny because it sounds pretentious out of Bill and Ted. It's just be excellent to each other. Um,
Excellent.
I think that's
It's not
it's
pretentious.
important.
Yeah.
It's important to put out there. I think
Yeah.
to
And
remind myself too. You
sure.
know,
Sure. And
it's not
and
a
I
very
will,
yeah.
it's not
Go
pretentious at
ahead.
all. And I will tell you this, out of the 780 people I have interviewed for this show, you are not the first person to say that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, you walk in familiar footsteps here when you say that. And frankly, it's a beautiful way of saying something that yes, it's entertaining and it's kind of funny because everybody knows Bill and Ted, but it's also profound. It really is kind of
Yeah,
profound that be nice, be kind, be
right,
be good to each other. The,
right.
I never want to lose the notion that that is a good thing. So I thank you, John, for that. I think it's great.
Thanks. What other answers have you gotten that you like? I'm just interested in this, or maybe we can
Uh,
talk about it later.
well, okay. So what I'm going to do when I don't remember. I think when I hit my 500th episode, I went through and took just that answer of every single episode that had been an interview episode and put them all together.
Oh,
And there are
cool.
two episodes that are like 4 or 5 minutes each. And you can just hear one right after. I'll send you the links. And in fact, I might put the links to that in the show notes. It's about time for me to do the next set of that. And yeah, because everybody's answers are fascinating and profound. And the notion of kindness and the notion of being nice and the notion of be imaginative are all over all of those. So I will send you the links to that, John, to those two little mini episodes because they're so fascinating and fabulous. So yeah, there have been a lot of
Cool.
very interesting answers to that. And because I like doing things that are a little strange, I did put two episodes out where in 4 minutes you can hear 150 people say their answer to that question. Anyway,
That's cool.
uh so John, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. This was super fun.
Well, thanks for having me. It was super fun,
Oh,
and
good.
you made it easy. Thanks.
Well, I did my job. Yay. All right, cool. And I hope that you'll come back when the next game releases or when we have other things to talk about having to do with the notion of imagination and designing experiences for other people, whether it's games or other kinds of experiences. I'm really grateful that you're out there doing it. So thanks again.
Great. Thanks.
All right. If you're listening to this and you want to know more about John Cooper and the games he's designed, you're going to need to go to the show notes, go to some of those places that he talked about, the BGG link, the Looney Labs link, Board Game Arena, and his link tree, which you'll find in the show notes. And I am super grateful that you took the time to be here to listen to this. It's been a fascinating conversation. And you know how much I love imagination, how much I love creativity, how much I love John's way of putting it, how important it is to get it out of your head and onto the table so that you can see what it is that you want to create. It's so important. The more you do it, the better we all are. So thank you so much for listening. And I am Izolda Trakhtenberg for the Your Creative Mind podcast, reminding you, as always, to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Izolda Trakhtenberg and is copyright 2025. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.